My Papaji was a man of principles. He taught us to respect all mankind, race, color, creed, and religion.
I think I must go back to my childhood to recall certain very vivid memories of him. And I remember he was being moved from one place to another in India, where he was detained and also imprisoned for his political activities. I think I would be around 3 to 4 years old at that time. And his train stopped at Delhi station. And when I saw him, I started crying. And when I started crying, there were a lot of askaris around him. He says, Kaka, tu kyo rona hai? Tera pyo te darda nahi kise kolo. What he was trying to say is, why are you crying? Your father is totally is not afraid of anything. And why should you be crying? And I think that was my first memory, that this father of mine, who was being moved from one place to another, had the guts to stand for whatever he believed in. When my father was born, there was only my grandmother. And they say, it is written in my grandfather's small history, they did not have a single pie even to get milk and various other little things when he was born. So he was born in abject poverty. That's one thing. The second thing is, he was left behind. My grandfather came into this country in 1920. My father would be about 7 years old when he was left behind in the village. Now after that, he came here in 1927. He was about 14 years old then. But those characters were already inbuilt with him, because when he finished his O-level, I think he had already made up his mind that he is going to work at that time into, you can call it trade union movement, for others' right. I think that is what he wanted to do all his life. He wanted to fight for others' right without any benefit to himself.
In 1973, when he died, I wrote an obituary for a local newspaper. So that was really my very first real contact with Makhan Singh as such. However, while researching, I kept coming up across the name of Makhan Singh as a great freedom fighter in Kenya. And I became more and more intrigued that so little was really known about him as a person, as a man, as a family man. Makhan Singh, when he finished his schooling, he joined the printing press that his father had established in 1933, the Khalsa printing press. And there he interacted with other workers and printers and people who worked in the trade. And my guess is that he learned a lot about workers' problems and colonial situations in Kenya at that time. There was quite a strong left-leaning ideology that was being expounded here. Also, there were many left-leaning people in Kenya, people like Ishwar Das, the revolutionaries of the Gadar party who were settled here and who actually worked with Makhan Singh. He grew up in that kind of atmosphere, and he must have imbibed a lot of that revolutionary fervor at that time.
What I know about Makhan Singh, he was a very great trade unionist. He started joining the labor movement when he was working with his father on a newspaper. And he agitated for workers' rights. Despite he was working for his father, he didn't care. He looked at this, how other employees were being used, and he found it was not fair. So he from there, he agitated the rights of the workers, and he joined the labor movement, because that was the time during the colonial days when trade unions were coming up, agitating for the freedom of workers. Makhan Singh, I've heard of his speeches when he was a leader, when he talked in the TVs, when he talked in the press, when he talked in the newspapers. He was a great man. I admired his vision. And the history we have put, the printing and come up with, we shall not forget, because we are on the foundation put up by late Makan Singh. The most important thing Makan Singh did for Kenya is to enlighten Kenyans to know their rights. Workers didn't know their rights. They were being frustrated, get low paid, work many hours, which Mr. Makan Singh stood for. And he fought hard to make sure that workers can work 9 hours, 8 hours, and remove the long hours people are working, create overtime, improve the welfare of workers. So a lot of things Makan Singh did for the workers which cannot be forgotten.
There are several aspects to Makan Singh. First of all, I think he's best known as the founder of the trade union movement in Kenya. Until he came on the scene, workers used to have their odd strikes and whatever, but there was no organized trade union movement. It is he who started it and gave it impetus. More than that even, he was able to understand the importance of the workers' participation in the anti-colonial movement. So he linked trade union matters to politics. And he said that it is the workers who would defeat the colonialists in Kenya. And that is exactly how it happened, because the Mau Mau struggle and all had as its leadership trade union leaders.
I have had him talk of different subjects, the politics at the Caroline Social Hall, the meetings at Pumwan Memorial Hall, Kiburi House. He was talking about the problems of the workers, particularly racial discrimination, segregation, Calabar. He talked about people at low level were given low wages when the top level, particularly the Europeans, were given big money. And I remember also Makan Singh was saying we had two Nairobis, one Nairobi poor Nairobi for Africans, maybe for Europeans. And it was so because that was happened because the areas were segregated. The Europeans were sitting eating in hotels which Asian and African could not go. They were buying shops where the African were restricted to buy, and it was written there on the door. Europeans only, African and dogs not allowed. So African were not even were to be able to even to go closer. Asian were owner of the shops, and the European were the customers, and the Asian were not allowed to buy in those Europeans only. So there was this kind of racial discrimination which Makan Singh was talking about. Early 1950. I remember I attended Kenyatta's meetings. At the door that we are here, that was the entrance of Makan Singh. Caroline Social Hall was the best place for the political meetings. This is the platform where the leaders used to be when other members now are listening to their speeches. It was also here on that day, the 23rd April 1950, the Makan Singh passed a resolution which was supported by Fred Kubai that East African should be independent as soon as possible.
When Makan Singh made the statement, Uhuru Sasa, what were the people feeling?
People felt very happy because they had never heard about the Uhuru Sasa for East Africa. They had been only talking about of Kenya. But now Makan Singh has come with the wider East Africa. Later, Makan Singh had now organized another meeting here. This was now to object Nairobi being given a charter. And Makan Singh and Fred Kubai, Kagia and the rest now are leading the trade unions, educating the workers not to accept the gifts, the feasts that were to be given, and the celebration. And thereafter, the Makan Singh and the friend Kubai were arrested, and Kubai was taken to court. Makan Singh was deported. they declared the general strike of Nairobi. It was after the general strike, now workers started seeing the benefits of the trade unions because they had the wage increases, they had the better terms and the condition of service being improved. Workers started seeing the fruit of mercanting thereafter, and trade unions were also recognized.
But what he did in those 2 or 3 years that I saw him in 48, 49, but totally amazing. Almost single-handed, he brought the trade union movement on a platform that it could carry it forward. And he never, ever expected anything in return. Never. At that time, it is not just trade union activity he was involved. He was involved in the actual politics of the country. And I think he was amongst the first persons to use. He said, I want to stop this argument. I want Uhuru Sasa. And I think these were the words he used in Kalonani's very famous speech, which was in 1950 or thereabout. And he was arrested within 2 weeks after that thing.
Makhan Singh was a very, very major threat to the British colonialists, more so than perhaps any other leader in Kenya at that time. And he became extremely difficult to deal with. So he had to be really, really isolated. And that's what the British did. With that very stage-managed trial which they held in Nyeri, they detained him and they virtually decided to forget about him.
The most hurtful feelings I still have, and when I remember them, they form a very dark, thick cloud over me. That is the morning when he was arrested. I can still see him being taken away by 2 white policemen flanked on either side in a black car which was parked on the footpath along Park Road across from our house while I was clinging to my BBG's leg. Being a child, I could not understand what was going on. That my Papaji was being taken away from me. It was a very traumatic episode.